Hi everyone, Bethany Smite Tanner here, the internet's busiest Smite nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Season 10 rosters. Yes, that time has come again. It's been a long time coming, and this time it's not like last year where it was basically Season 8.5. No, this year the new teams are in, and it is a full-blown rosterpocalypse. The new teams are here, and there is some spice. There is some real spice, some really interesting teams to talk about. So let's get into it. I did a similar video a couple of years ago, back at the beginning of Season 8, I believe, when we had all the new rosters and brands and stuff like that. Didn't feel the need to do it for Season 9, because again, nothing happened. But for this year, I think it might be helpful to talk some people through what's going on, who's going where, who's going to be good, who's going to be doo-doo. And after this, I might do a little cheeky review of all the previous rosters, the previous groups that maybe aren't going to survive to this year, and kind of talk about how their time went in the league and kind of talk through their progress, their ups and downs, what they did, what they didn't do, and generally just a roundup of how they did as a team, given that we're probably not going to be seeing those teams again anytime soon. So I'm going to run through these teams in the order that they were revealed by Smite Pro in an excruciating hour-by-hour release, where we actually only got 6 of the 8 teams. There are 2 teams still yet to enter the fray who will be decided via a playoff tournament, and that tournament is going to happen in a month or so's time, and we find out the teams for those in a couple of weeks, I believe. This is probably entirely incorrect, and hopefully I've put the actual information here when we get there. And so I might look at those, I might do a similar review of those teams, but truthfully, those tend to be a bit more in flux, and a lot of them won't qualify, so maybe not, but we shall see. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the first reveal was a team reveal that shocked everyone to its core. No one saw this one coming. The Camelot Kings, they're back. They stay together. The current reigning world champions decided not to change anything. Mind-blowing stuff. Who saw this coming? In seriousness, I mean, these guys were arguably the best team over the last 2 years. They were unlucky in tournaments, and this time they seem to have found the ice in their veins. With Yarkor coming into the ADC, they absolutely crushed Worlds. It wasn't even close. Didn't drop a single game, which no team has ever done. Not even NRG at their best. Not even the Leviathans last season, which was the most dominant run I had ever seen until that point. The Kings somehow eclipsed that, and it's absolutely zero surprise they're staying together. These guys were the regular season bullies, and now they're the tournament bullies as well. So I don't think anyone's shocked to see them stay together, but it's not all roses for the team, because there are some things they need to be careful of. The first is that Genetics' ego may grow to dangerous levels, medically dangerous levels. And the other is that Yarkor might decide at any point that he fancies winning a world championship in a different role and just jet off to the mid lane for a while, which they actually did consider. If BMT had retired, the Shark would have gone into mid. That man. And do you know what would have happened? He would have won Worlds again. But on a more serious note, the big question mark for this team, the one thing that they have to look out for moving forward, is that of motivation. It's the classic you see. It's easy getting to the top. The hard part is staying there, coming from someone who's never got even close to the top. Let's remind ourselves about the Leviathans last season. They went through Worlds in a very similar fashion to how the Kings just did as well. They were the best team by far, absolutely dominant, and it wasn't even close. Having grinded so hard to get to that point, to work to that level as a team, they start at the beginning of the next season, and you can just tell straight away that they're not quite the same team. The motivation isn't there. They just don't really turn up. And I mean, it's hard to blame them when you've been scrimming and playing ranked as much as they do, grinding as hard as they do. You finally get there. The want to improve kind of starts to disappear. That same passion, that same fire you had to get up and practice every single day does diminish. And that's something that the Kings might really struggle with, especially given that pretty much everyone on that team, other than Genetics, has spoken about potentially retiring. They considered that last season might have been their last season. I think last Worlds breathed a whole new life into the pro scene, and I think it changed lots of people's opinions on whether they wanted to stay or not, and inspired them to stick it out for just a bit longer. But it's easy to do that in the height of the moment when everyone's excited and it's Worlds and you're winning. And then suddenly the long winters set in and you're scrimming and you have to wake up before 11 a.m, which to a lot of these players is subhuman conditions. It might suddenly all look a bit less rosy from them. And this is an especially important time to be locked in, because we have a completely new map, completely new items. There will be a brand new meta. that is yet to be seen, and the best teams are the ones that are on it from minute one, deciding what they like, what they don't like, and basically setting the pace for the rest of the league. And that's something the Kings were always really, really good at doing. That's something they were always great at, thinking and being ahead of the game. And you wonder, if they're not as motivated over the offseason, will they still bring that same level of intelligence? I still think so. You can tell genetics is still locked in. The man is just a theory crafting machine. He's constantly churning out new theories of what's good, what's bad. He's always thinking about the game, and Twig, even at his least motivated, will be thinking about the game more than just about any other jungler in the league. So I don't really have any concerns for this team. The only concerns I have for these teams are self-imposed. Can they keep themselves motivated? Because otherwise, we know just how good they're going to be. And now for the second team. Although the first team may not have been that spicy, the second team made up for it. I can already taste the spice in the air. I don't know if that's something you can do, but we have the Atlantis Leviathans. But these are not the same Atlantis Leviathans you knew and loved. You still have the same core. You still have Zatman in ADC, Rongyu in support, and Shinto in the mid lane. But Panatom and Haddix are gone and replaced with Fine OK, the Fine OK in the solo lane, and in the jungle, the king himself, back from the distant lands of Europe to rule over us again. King Kenneth, Adapt King, adapting is back in the jungle, and he's with the 3-time world champion in the ADC, one of the best solo laners the league has ever seen in Fine OK. This team is spicy. So the big thing to talk about here is that Fine OK has, for the very first time since it is joining a team rival in Season 6, split up from the PandaCat and PBM core that has been the backbone of Team Rival, goes Jade Dragons, which has brought them an incredible amount of success. I mean, World Finals Season 6, World Finals Season 7. They won a ton of mid-seasons in the middle. In fact, what season was it? Season 7, where they won. They were one game off winning everything, both mid-season tournaments and the World Finals, except a certain PK got in the way of that. These guys achieved a ton of success and really were the benchmark for the league for a very long time. But the one thing that they didn't achieve was a world title, and all of that success without getting the thing that you really wanted, I think has really worn down at these guys. A lot of them spoke about this want for change, that no matter how much they liked each other, no matter how well it's gone in the past, they haven't been able to get it over the line. And they just wanted to try something different. They wanted to give it another go with a different lot of people. But yeah, now we get to see a whole new side of Fine OK. He's had to play through the kind of rival ghost run it down style all this time, and I wonder whether we'll see a different kind of play style. I imagine not. Solo laners kind of just do their thing no matter what team they're in. They run it down in solo, they blink into backlines and ult. That's what they do on every team. But it'll be really interesting to see how he fits in, because we have not seen them out of that kind of dominant lane pressure style for years and years now. Whereas the Leviathans, as they will probably admit themselves, one of the slower teams. They're not exactly the kind of run it down aggro teams. They're a lot more cerebral. I hate that word, but they tend to be a lot more focused on playing the map properly, getting wins where they can, and playing smart. So it'll be really interesting to see how that fits into that. But what is probably the more interesting talking point is the jungle. Panatom is gone, and that is a huge loss. So from a Hazer interview where they were talking about, various roster swaps and roster apocalypses that were discussed before this big one, they talked about the fact that they'd considered kicking Panatom a couple of times, which blew my tiny mind, because Panatom has been running the show for the last couple of years now. He has been the most consistent and the most dominant jungler I've seen in a while. And that's not just my opinion. You've heard many of the junglers, like Twig especially, will say that Panatom's just been running it. And he's been a huge win condition for this team throughout the years. So to see him gone, I mean, those are pretty big shoes to fill, but I know someone with bigger feet. Adapt King is back. I can't believe it. Retirement means nothing in Smite. No one can resist the allure of those rank queues, hitting them at 3 a.m. and getting absolute shitters in your lobbies. No one can resist coming back. For those who've been living under a rock for the last 10 years, Adapting was the best player in the world by some distance for quite a long period of Smite. He was widely considered, and probably still is widely considered, the best player of all time. Some people might say Pool or Yaman, but this guy, when you're talking about the GOAT debate, he is probably the default answer. And so to give a kind of timeline of how things went for Adapting, NRG, Epsilon, Panthera, all of their various names, that team were dominant over Season 2, 3, and were really strong still over Season 4 and 5. But whereas Adapting was leagues ahead of everyone in those years, those dominant years, in Seasons 4 and 5 and 6, the standard of the rest of the leagues really raised, and suddenly he was still really good, but by no means the best, and I think actually outclassed by other players over that period. And things only got more and more competitive. They had a huge blow up on the supposed super team Pittsburgh Knights in season 6, which was supposed to be the best team that Smite had ever seen, and ended up being a complete car crash. And then he moved on to Radiance in season 7, which was a year completely destroyed by COVID, and the team seemed to have really just bad vibes all around. And despite them getting to the semi-finals and going to 5 games against PK, they lost, and Adapting called it a day. But now he's back, and rightfully so. A lot of people are very excited about this team. There are some huge names on there. Just between Zapman and Adapting together, they've got 5 world titles between them, and 2 other world's winners lurking in support and jungle as well. But this is where I'm going to be a bit of a party pooper. I'm gonna pop the fun balloon in that I don't think this team are as good as the Leviathans were. I think this team has downgraded. Now, this may be a take which ages are like rancid milk, but if you're not putting your neck on the line, what's the point of making predictions? So don't get me wrong, Adapting has been one of the best, and in terms of skill ceiling is about as high as you can imagine. But Panatom was the best for about 2 years straight now. It's also worth remembering that across seasons 4, 5, and 6, he was no longer the best. He was still really good, and they were good teams, but he wasn't the best. And when he retired back on Radiance, top 4 jungler for sure, but not the guy running the show that everyone was used to. He's now had basically a year out of the Pro League. He's been playing SEC, and don't get me wrong, the Ravens looked really good. And in fact, I thought Adapting looked absolutely fantastic. But I think this team could be a bit of a slow starter. You've got a team in the Leviathans who are looking to kind of bounce back and rebuild off of what was quite a disappointing season last season. They started off slow. They really picked up pace in that they got the longest win streak in SPL history towards the end. They really looked like they were kind of pulling it back together, but just looked off the pace at Worlds. And I think probably behind the scenes, some tensions we're not seeing. There are rumours of them not really scrimming that much. So it's going to be a matter of trying to rebuild that hunger and then rebuild the synergy in terms of having a completely new jungler who's going to have his own playstyle. And Adapting has always liked to be the hyper carry. Get the most farm, get really farmed up. Do you know who else really likes farm? It's Shinto. Shinto, the farm king himself, who will be 0-3 and be 3 levels up in his jungler. And I just don't see adapting to that very well. So I think this team is going to take a bit of time. I think people are going to expect them to be popping off immediately, but Zapman's teams have never been good starters in the league. They've never started well. Not since the Scarabs. They always take a bit of time. And I think this team, if they click, have the potential to be top 2. Like, these guys are really, really strong. But I think it will take Adapting a bit of time to get back into the league. I think Fino K I don't really have as many concerns about. I mean, this is Fino. He's a solo laner. So I think solo laners require the least amount of synergy in a team because they're on their own. Duh. But I think Fino also just plays such a strong style where I don't really have any concerns about how he's going to fit in. But to come full circle on my Adapting hate, coming from the biggest Adapting super fanboy there is, I think that the way that this team is going to play, I think, is going to really suit him. When did Adapting look at his best? On NRG, on Panthera, on Epsilon. And if you think back to how that team played, I think there are 2 aspects that people really heavily overlook when they were watching the Adapting show. In Rafa and Dimmy, you had 2 people who were so willing to just get in there and throw down. Doesn't matter how their laning phase went, they were always willing to get in there, dive the backline, and basically make space for people like Yaman, Adapting, and Emil to do their thing. And I think when the teams changed in future to Emilzy, I think they lost a bit of that. I don't think Emilzy was as much of a dive-in support. He's more of a kind of peel, play it slow sort of support. When you're someone like Adapting who loves to get in there and get kills after the big fight has happened, after all the cooldowns are down, I think he struggled to find the same entrances that he used to on the NRG team. And so if you then look at the team that he's on now, Rongyu, someone who gets in there. Fine, okay, someone who gets in there more than just about any other player. Hell, even Zapman likes to get in there as well. I think this team is going to be really well suited for us to see part 2 of the Adapting show, because Fine OK is going to be making a ton of room, so is Rongyu, so is Zap. I think we're going to see the Shinto Adapting carry project reach hopefully its full potential. So expectations for this team, This is a team that's put together to win worlds. This isn't a team that's going to be put together to have a good season. There are too many world titles on this team as is to not have those expectations of yourself. Fine, okay, for all of his success in the league and in the various tournaments, still has not won worlds, and I'm sure that's weighing quite heavily on him. And the list of people who deserve worlds, who haven't won them, is dwindling. It's dwindling massively now that Twig and Variety have got their rings. So this team will want to win worlds, and anything short of that, I imagine, will be seen. Maybe not as disappointing if they have a good season, but that's what they're in it for. I think it'll just be a matter of seeing how they adapt to the league moving forwards. And just imagine showing someone in season 3 that Zapman and Adapting were going to end up on the same team. So now for the third team revealed, and although this team hasn't seen that many actual changes, do not let that fool you into thinking that there isn't some serious spice here. This is the new look Jade Dragons, who you might think of more as the Oni Warriors, but new brand, new year, new me. This is the Oni Warriors core of Nika, Dades, and Vote. But now, with the new additions, having seen Fred and Neil retire or go into coaching respectively, you now have in the jungle, Lasbra, and in the support, Polar Bear Mike. Hot damn! They wouldn't do it again, would they? They wouldn't hurt me again, would they? So for those who can cast their mind back to this time 2 years ago when the Oni Warriors were originally announced, I was so excited with this team. I was so excited. I had this down as a top 2, top 3 team. These guys were going to be some of the best. This was the remnants of the Space Station team, which had been top 2 for 2 of the league's most competitive years, complemented by Cuvo and Neil, coming straight off the back of winning another world championship for the PK team. This team felt like it had everything to succeed. What we instead saw were 2 years of the most lukewarm, middle-of-the-road, wet blanket performances from a team that had so much talent. This team upset me so many times, because they had so much potential and they had so many flashes of brilliance, but even when they were being good, they still managed to find a way to fuck it up. They basically really struggled in the first season with consistency issues, and this year, just when it started to look like it might be coming together for them, it comes around to Worlds and they go back to their normal disappointing performances, crash out early, having fought so hard to get to Worlds in the first place through a pretty brutal qualification tournament. They then crash out at the first sign of any real opposition. So it was a bit of a question moving into this year whether that core would stay together. We knew that Fred was retiring, we knew that Neil was going to coaching, so the question was whether that core of players who seemed to really like each other, would they still stay together as a team? Now, something I always said about this team when I was watching them is just that they didn't really seem to have any ideas. I love Neil. I think Neil's a fantastic player. But I think the way that Neil has played best and the way that they really made their name on PK was as a counter-punching team. They were never the team going out and running it down. They were the team taking it late, winning really intricate team fights and all of this kind of stuff. And I think the problem is that you had 3 players in Vote, Dades and Nika who didn't really play like that as much. They kind of wanted to be on the offensive, and you had a team where they didn't really know if they wanted to be going forward or backwards or side to side, and they just looked short of ideas the entire time they played. And it felt like even when they should be winning and crushing less experienced teams, lower down teams, or maybe upsetting some of the big teams, they just didn't really seem to have the same X factor, whatever you want to say. They kind of just seem to sit around like, I don't really know what I'm doing, and just slowly lose these games. And it's tough to watch because you know how good they can be. You had the Nika carry project all season long. You had, Dades I still think is great, and Vote I think had a fantastic season. They just can never string any wins together. And so the thing that I always said is imagine what this team would look like if you put in a support like PBM, like Genetics, like Aurora. And what do you know? The Smite gods have listened and answered my prayers, because now we have PBM in there. This is exactly to the player what I think this team needed. Someone who's going to come in with a ton of ideas, shot calling, who's going to be running the map, who's going to be invading, going to be all over the place, driving this team forwards. This is like a breath of fresh air. And it makes me so scared that it's happening again. I'm doing another team prediction where I'm like, oh, these guys are going to be good. Now they're going to be good. Surely they're going to be good now. And they're going to find a way to fuck it up like they always do. Sorry. No, Dan, head in the game. Positive. We're optimistic. This can only go well. I think the addition of Lasbra is a great pickup as well. Lasbra was the best player on the Bolts, other than maybe Havix, for the last couple of years. And it was a bit of a meme for a very long time that if Lasborough does well, the Bolts do well. But it might have been a meme, but it's kind of true. I mean, this guy ran the show for that team for a very long time. And whereas before, back when they were the Renegades in like season 7, I think it was, or season 6, they were kind of widely considered to be really inconsistent. Lasborough especially was like either he was on or off. Whereas now I think he's one of the more consistent jungles in the entire league. And he's also another one of these players who has a ton of ideas of where he's going to be on the map, where he wants to go, who he wants to target. And I think together, I could see Mike and Lasborough being a really dangerous combo as a kind of mid 2v2. So I really don't think that Lasborough's addition to this team should be overlooked at all. And judging from interviews I've heard from Nika and PBM, the way that they understand the game, the way they think about the game between Lasborough and Mike and Nika, whatever, is all really similar. They all seem to be on the same wavelength. So in theory, on paper, things are looking good. He says, again, knowing that I'm only going to get hurt. And to talk about the Oni Warriors core that are staying here of Nika, Dardes and Vote, I think some people will give it a bit of criticism and say, they really achieved very little over the last few years. How they're going to stay together? How is Mike going to join a trio that he's beaten fairly comfortably the last 2 years? But I firmly disagree. I don't think the issue with the Oni Warriors was ever that of player skill. And I think people who think that are maybe just results-based thinking, because at the end of the day, we all know exactly how good Nika is. I mean, Nika's been carrying the team in the league for months and months. I think Vote had a fantastic last season. I think people massively underrate just how good Vote is. I think Vote is fantastic. And I think a Mike Vote duo lane is going to be pretty disgusting. And I've always said, and I still am of the opinion, that Dardes is one of the best mid laners on the planet. I still think we're going to see that this year. I think you're going to really show, with two frontliners in front of him willing to go in, absolutely get stuck in there. I think we're really going to see just how good he is all over again. So I'm not surprised they stuck together. And in fact, I'm quite glad that they did, because I think this is the way they turn around that stigma of them being, underachievers or whatever. I think this team really can do well. Again, I think there's going to be some growing pains on this team, but I don't think that many growing pains. It wouldn't surprise me if this is a team that came out from week 1 looking really good. And I swear to God, if they fuck it up again, I will be fuming. Next team review, they're getting 0 out of 10 no matter who else is on their team. I don't care if God himself is in the mid lane, they're getting 0 out of 10. And although the tweet doesn't show a coach on this team, they've got Cherio in the coaching role, which it's just, the Space Station boys are back. It warms my heart to see, but I think that's a perfect coaching pickup. I think it's going to bring a lot of good to this team. And okay, on to team number 3. And here we have our first proper, completely brand spanking new team, the Highland Ravens, with Barracuda in the ADC, Horrorwind in the support, Veneno in the mid lane, Scream in the jungle, and Haddix in the solo lane with master coaching. Ooh, this is kind of spicy, kind of not. This is kind of a bunch of different teams that have half existed together, merging into one. This is Dan from the future jumping in to say what I just said there was complete rubbish. It's just half of the Bolts with half of the E-United core from Season 4. I do realise this a bit later on, but I just wanted to jump in and apologise for past Dan and just have no clue what's going on. Back in the very, very old days, Horrorwind spent a lot of time as the sub for the cognitive team that Barra was on. Barra and Haddix obviously on the Bolts together. Scream and Ven obviously won a world title together on E-United. They've been reunited. And obviously Barra, Ven and Haddix were on the Bolts together for nearly 2 years. So when I say it's a completely new team, I was lying. And I'm not entirely sure on how I feel about this team. It gets me kind of feeling of, I think there are some good bits. I think Scream is one of the best junglers in the league at the moment. He's absolutely brilliant, and he's really good at leading a team in terms of how he wants to play, and he just gets in there, man. He just gets in there and presses his buttons. We all know that Haddix is one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent solo laner in the league, if not consistent player in the league. He just gets in there, gamer time, probably he's got Spotify playing in his ears, not even listening to calls, just vibing it down his lane. Does his job in team fights, very solid player. The question marks come with the rest of the kind of Bolts core. I think that was a core that really stagnated over time. They looked very good at the beginning of their time as the Bolts, really threatening, making it to finals of all sorts of events, and they kind of just slowly went downhill from there. I do think I overdo how much they've gone downhill, because they actually had some quite good regular season performances towards the time of the end, but they never really contested for anything tournament-wise after that. The tournament talk was always about the Leviathans or the Kings or the Titans. The Bolts were kind of, or the Dragons, sorry. And the Bolts were kind of just a bit of a speed bump in the way, but not really much concern to any Worlds winner. And although I thought Ven had a really good start to Season 7, I think he was disappointing towards the end of the year. Same for Bauer. Bauer had games where he was carrying, especially on Sol, where he was hard carrying. I mean, the man's got his own video specifically for how hard he carried on that character. But other times, not so great. Had some really good performances around Worlds and just before Worlds. So he still got it. He still got those moments of greatness. It just needs to be a kind of season-wide thing. And finally, I think the biggest question mark on this team, just naturally because of how long he's been in the role, is Horrorwind. Harry moving to support was really interesting. I think he got frustrated at how little impact he could have on the game in mid. Mid laners are often just kind of a victim of how the game is going for their frontliners. So if you can't beat the frontliners, become the frontliner. And I think when he was on the Scarabs, I was quite thoroughly unconvinced. He had good moments and good sort of plays in team fights, but I think his map awareness, his general support mechanics weren't quite there in the same way that, I mean, you're going against Aurora, you're going against PBM, you're going against, you know, some of the best players to ever touch the game. And I think he just got a bit exposed in that sense. But with that being said, the qualifiers for Worlds when he was on the Scarabs, I thought he looked like one of their best players. I thought suddenly he looked like a real support player. I'm glad to see that he's gotten another chance. A part of me thought that maybe he might just end up in SCC this year. So it'll be interesting to see how his kind of progression continues. He's definitely a smart player. He's someone who puts a lot of thought into the game, and he's really hungry to improve now he's in a new role. He will be one of the weaker players coming into the league. I think there's just no doubt about it given how long he's been in the role. But I think how well he does is really going to dictate how this team does. He will definitely be helped by having a much more consistent frontliner in Haddix as compared to Scary D. Scary D has great moments, but also has real shitter moments. And it's the same in the jungle as well, where he had Sam for Soccer before, who Sam can absolutely take over a game and hard carry, and Sam can also shit it up with the rest of us shitters. So I think having a more consistent front line with Haddix and having a more consistent jungler in Scream, I think is really going to help his map play. And really, this team could be good. This team could be good. They have the potential, right? If Horrorwind really steps up, this team can be an excellent team. But there's just this nagging thought in the back of my mind that thinks in the first few weeks, these guys are going to look a bit lost, a bit asleep at the wheel. And I think they're going to struggle in the first few weeks. But I don't know, a bit more hunger back in someone like Bauer and Ven, I think could really have bring us back to the early days of the Bolts where they look like one of the more dominant teams early on. A nice aggressive jungler in Scream. I think Ven does really well with aggressive junglers. I mean, these guys have won a title together on a United. They've got that synergy. They know how each other like to play. They've spoken highly of each other in the past. So I think this team could be good. But my gut instinct says this is going to be one of the weaker teams in the league. And I've also just realised I never actually said their name. They're the Highland Ravens, if you didn't know, which I think I'm glad to see that brand in the league because it's way cooler than the Scarabs. And now on to the fourth roster, which has to be the most baffling of all of them. It's the Styx Ferrymen, which the Ferrymen themselves, which consist of Cyclone Spin in the ADC role, Aurora in support, Paul in the mid lane, Sino in the jungle, and Baskin, the GOAT himself, in solo. So this is obviously the same core of the Titans we saw over the last couple of years, except for those of us with memories longer than about 3 minutes long, you may remember that Cyclone got kicked from this team like just a couple of months ago. Cyclone got kicked, and now he's back. And I knew he'd be back in the league, but I didn't expect him to come back into the exact same team that he left. The only real difference is in the solo lane, and now that Layers is out of the jungle, with Sino coming back in to reprise his role from Worlds. There is a lot to say about this team, and most of it ends in a question mark. Like, firstly, why? How? Who? Where? When? So let's look at the positives first, right? These guys had an exceptional Worlds run. People not expecting them to... Well, some people didn't even think they were going to qualify for Worlds. And for when they did qualify, a lot of people just thought they're going to get absolutely stomped by the Leviathans. I mean, only real idiots predicted the Leviathans to win 2-0. Like, let's be real. So I've got this down as a Levies dub. But yeah, people thought they were going to get stomped. Going to be a bit of a wash, given that their jungler Layers, who they had a ton of success with, wouldn't be able to play in the league. Sino comes in, starts picking fucking random shit like Thanatos. I mean, it works. It absolutely works. He makes it work, and he makes it work again. These guys have made it all the way to finals. And let's not talk about finals because that was a bit of a mess. They looked good for about 10 minutes of game 3, and that's about it. But against that Kings team, not really a whole lot you could do. So we'll ignore the finals and say that these guys suddenly had a spark of life towards the end. But that does not mask the fact that this team was not happy families for a very long time. Cyclone gets kicked out of seemingly nowhere. Aurora and Cyclone have been a duo lane forever and had a ton of success together, winning Worlds in Season 5 with Splice, yada yada. But suddenly he's gone, and that team must have lost a huge presence in there. But for whatever the reason was, there was a reason he got kicked. And he's back! He's back again! And he's not back into a completely new team. He's not back into some rosterpocalypse mess. He's back into a team that basically existed beforehand. Sorry, just burped. Like, sure, they've got Baskin in the solo now, but I mean, is that really that big of a difference? I don't know, man. Part of me, this might sound a bit mean, but part of me just wanted this team to break up. They've been so up and down, good and bad, players in, players out, players back again. I kind of just wanted them to start from fresh and like re-find an identity for themselves, because this team they've had good moments, but each good moment has seemed to come from a massive battle to get there. It's been an uphill struggle for a lot of their time together. So I thought this would be a nice time to turn the page, clean the slate, and start over. But what do I know? Instead, they're going, no, instead of turning a new page, we're going back to an old page. We're bringing back Cyclone. And look, Cyclone is obviously one of the best to ever do it. No team in the entire world is going to be made worse by having Cyclone in it. You've obviously got Paul in the mid lane, who is in the discussion for best player ever. Aurora, who is also in that discussion. Again, we're having the exact same discussion that we did about the Tartarus Titans back when they were revealed in Season 8, in the, you're naming some of the best players on the planet. And they had Benji in there as well, who again is probably the best solo laner to ever touch the game, apart from maybe a certain Mr. Baskin Smite. So on paper, this should be a really good team, and this should be a team that crush it and should be one of the best in the league, but I just don't think they will be. They might be kind of regular season bullies for a bit, but I just don't think they... Why am I hating on this team so much? They're so good on paper. They should be really good, but I can't get this feeling of out of my head. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing this team and the drama and whatever. I think one thing that has come out of the kind of the Aurora Cyclone duo lane, everyone loves Aurora. Aurora, by all accounts, is a fantastic team and a great team leader, but the Radiance team back in Season 7 or whatever it was had a ton of problems in terms of the mood of the team. They had Tings and adapting in the jungle then with Benji and Solo. Obviously Benji's not there anymore, but adapting in Tings, the way that they described it said that just the mood in the team was really low throughout their time. And the same goes for the Titans. It sounds like even in the early days, it was not a happy place to be on a team. And all the drama and the ups and downs, I can't help but wonder, is it still bad? Do people want to be on this team? I'm glad to see Sino back in the league because he's a very interesting player and he does shit differently to just about everyone else. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I was kind of just expecting these guys to try something new. But look, at the end of the day, 4 of these 5 players are in the discussion for the best to ever touch the game. And the only one who I wouldn't say is in that discussion is someone who's won a world's MVP. So on paper, this is one of the best teams, but meh. And another thing to talk about with this team is, a spoiler alert for the rest of the teams, but Stuart is not on an SPL roster as of yet. I imagine my spidey senses tell me that he's going to be on a very strong play-ins roster, but he has not made this team. And in fact, Cyclone has made it back. And I think Stuart had a really good showing up until, I think basically until Worlds Finals. I think his Worlds Finals were a bit poor. But until then, I mean, dude was fragging. There was a reason you heard Stu every 10 seconds at Worlds, because he was doing well. Maybe a little harsh on him to not get the spot back, especially if the team is generally staying together. But we never know how this rosterpocalypse stuff goes behind the scenes. For all we know, there's been an absolute mess behind the scenes and he wants to out of the team. Maybe they wanted him out. Who knows? But he definitely deserves to be on a team, and I think he will be back on. I think he will be back in the SPL. I'd be very surprised if he isn't, in whatever shape team he gets in. But yeah, this team just, yeah. So a few minutes have passed. I've been sat here pondering why I just can't get excited about this team. And I really don't have a reason. I think maybe the drama that happened last year just got me tired of the team, and maybe just the names are a bit tarnished, but maybe I have been harsh on them because their team are really good. I just got my phone out and like saw the list of names. I was like, fuck, that's a really good team. That's a really good team. I mean, when you got Paul on the team, literally anything can happen. Yeah. Maybe this team are a lot better than I'm giving them credit for. We shall have to see. Ooh, we've saved the spiciest till last. And now for something completely fucking different. I'm going to have to keep checking my phone to remember who is on this team, because this looks like a ranked lobby. This is the word hodgepodge springs to mind. What a random collection of top tier players we have. So, Netroid in ADC, Awesome Jake 408 in the support role, Pay Goat himself in the mid lane, Panatom in the jungle, and Solo or Troll in the solo lane. He was going to try and roll swap to mid, but got a cracking offer out of this team to go back into solo, and then Oxy in the coach role. What do you even say about this team? This feels to me like one of those weird, like, build your own teams that I see on the Smite Pro Reddit sometimes, where someone's like, I like these players, I like Panatom, and I like Pagan, and Solo or Troll, put them on a team. But it's in reality, this feels to me like a bunch of players who kind of fell through the cracks of roster mania. In the Netroid was on the Scarabs, and truthfully, he was far too good for that team. Netroid's top tier ADC, and I can understand that he didn't exactly want to be bumming it around on teams that don't even qualify to Worlds. Pagon seemed like he wanted to leave the Dragons core. Fair enough to him. I think Pagon proved himself to be one of the best mids in the league, one of the best players in the league last season. He's got a real explosive flair to him, and everyone on that team speaks super highly of him. So I think, again, looking at one of the best mids in the league here. Solo or Troll, you know how much I rate Solo or Troll. Dude, he just presses his buttons better than everyone else. One of the most mechanically gifted players I've ever seen. Sometimes decision making is a little skew-if, but like, if you're going to get diffed in solo, it's Solo or Troll is going to diff you in a huge way. Unless you're Variety, and then you're going to solo him at level 3. But yeah, dude's a beast. Panatom in the jungle, again, I said earlier about how much I rate Panatom. He is insanely good and is the sort of person who just wins games for you by himself. I think you single-handedly get like 5 league wins just from having him on your team. Like you cash in a kind of, I can't really be bothered to play this game. I'm just going to give Panatom the ball, let him go ape shit with it. So that's always good. And then Awesome Jake 408 in support, who I think, what to say about Awesome Jake? When he came into the league, everyone thought he was going to suck. And he turned out to be really good. And then he had a really good season, kind of on the Renegades, moving into his time in the Bolts. He was dynamic, he was playmaking, all of that stuff. And then, if he's on a graph at that point, he's gone up to here, and I hate to say this because I really like Jake, but it kind of just like down the whole way and just plateaued, nosedived. He was kind of shitting it last year. He was kind of shitting it up in a big way. He's still a very talented player, capable of really good moments, but he just kind of lost it. Whatever he had, he just kind of lost it on the Bolts. I think that team did kind of stagnate as a whole, and I can't help but feel that when I think about the team stagnating, I'm really just thinking about Jake stagnating. He can still be a game winner, I'm sure, and he can still have these great moments, but they're more few and far between than they've ever been, I think. And I feel like more and more as these seasons progress, the support is just the glue for a team, and the support isn't stepping up. It's not like old years where you could have a support kind of just be a bit AWOL and sacrifice his farm to everyone else and just back us flop in at the end to secure it, to steal a Viager, and you're back in the game. Like, supports run the map just as much as junglers do. Maybe not so much this season. Junglers do seem to be really strong. And last season was kind of more jungler favoured than before. But in a couple of years before that, supports, I think, were the most important player. And if the support's not there, the rest of the team just looks faltering. With no front line, with no one setting the pace and deciding where the team going, calling the shots. Teams struggle. But I think a new environment for Jake will really suit him. I think he's with players who are more similar to his playstyle now, in terms of them being all bunch of fucking rogues who just do what they want. Just every time I look at this team, man, I cannot decide what I think about it. This is the team I'm going to be watching with the most interest because, look, there are a bunch of winners on this team. This is probably the best mechanical team out there, period. Like this, there's no other team with a bigger level of variance between where I think they're going to end up. Because these guys could come out of the gates and just absolutely destroy everyone, like the big ranked lobby it is. Or they could be complete shitters who have no idea what they're doing and they've all been relying on their teammates. I have no idea. This really reminds me of that Armada team that beat Team Rival in that huge upset in Season 6. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then boy, do I have a video for you. In that, there kind of just seem to be 5 random, really good players lobbed together. And something tells me that this team will lack consistency, and they won't have that kind of Camelot Kings quality of being really solid and hard to beat. I think they're a team that are going to win really hard. When they win, they're going to absolutely crush. And when they lose, they're going to absolutely capitulate and shit the bed. These are a bunch of players from a bunch of different teams who haven't really mixed together before. There's going to be so many contrasting and clashing play styles. We don't know how they're going to want to play together. I don't think they know how they're going to want to play together. I think there's going to be a real period of growing pains. There's going to be a lot to learn. But at the end of the day, this team could be insane. This team could be really good. Pagon, Panatom, Solo Troll as a 3 is insane. Those are 3 of the best in slot. I think Netroid is just really solid. I have no concerns about Netroid. I think it really comes down to how quickly Jake gets back to his best. So yeah, those are the teams. There's your rosterpocalypse, all neatly packaged up. Some real crazy shit. We're going to see some wild games at the beginning, I think. So it's got a brand new format. It's going to have some... the teams aren't brand new, but the changes in them, even the ones that have stayed with similar cores, have had massive changes. Like the Atlantis Leviathans, for example. It might be 3 of the same players on that old team, but you cannot say that that's not a spicy team with King Kenny coming back and Fino being in there. It's going to be such an interesting season. I really do think the Last Worlds has just rejuvenated Smite as a whole, and I think it really shows the importance of having a big payoff to the end of the season. I think they've kind of taken that on board with the new league format, in that there's less regular season games, doesn't make the league feel as much of a slog, and now it's more focused around the big tournaments and stuff like that. I want to see mid-season lands. Doesn't have to be big, just little ones, just to hear a crowd. I think that's what people will love. You kind of go through the regular season, it's not as interesting, and then you get to the end, it's the big payoff, the hype plays, and the big titles. That's what people are excited for. If those just feel like regular studio games, then you kind of lose that fun. So I think this Worlds was super important for breathing a big breath of life back into all the players' motivation and their want to play and their want to grind it out, start new teams. I think this is going to be a super interesting year. So some of the sharper-eyed among you may have noticed there are some fairly substantial omissions from that list of players that you would very much expect to be in the league. So who were we missing, for example? Well, as mentioned, there are 2 teams yet to be announced. They will be decided through the playoff bracket in a few weeks' time. The teams that to me are really missing are the Valks. So we're talking Aquarius, Kiyomi, Benny Q, Gamma, and Wowie, who were not the best team last season, but definitely SBL quality, had some really good games. I mean, towards the end of the season, they just shit the bed for some reason. But a lot of those members, the team members, you really expect to be in SBL because they're definitely good enough. So I'm pretty sure the Valks have actually split this time. And if they haven't, then they have well and truly bamboozled me, and it's been one of the biggest baits I've ever seen. But I'm pretty sure they have actually split, which is quite a big change for them because these guys have been together for a very long time. So interesting to see which bits of them stay together, which little splinters end up here and there. If they have stayed together, then they made me look like a complete mug. But the other one that people are expecting to see are the Solar Scarabs, or the remnants of that team. So obviously Horrorwind has made it back into the league, but the rest of that team, so the Sam for Soccers of this world, the Scary D's, Baronix, blah, 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 nowhere to be seen. And potentially the biggest omission, an ex-Scarab himself, Stu Rat, Help or Hindrance. Where is Stuart? Stuart had a great performance last year, and I expected to see him in these reveals. Hasn't quite made it in, so something tells me that there are 1 or 2 really strong playoff teams lurking. I think it's going to be a real challenge to the SEC players coming in. So I know that, for example, Sam is on a team. Sam for Soccer is on a team. He's been talking about how he's been scrimming. I'd be very surprised if Stuart wasn't as well. There are a ton of really good players at this level who weren't on that original list of reveals. I just get the impression that there are 1 or 2 really strong playoff teams that are going to come in and kind of wipe the floor and make it all the way to SBL fairly cleanly. On the EU side, you've also got the entirety of Hex Mambo, who, I mean, that always comes with the big caveat of, are they willing to move? I think all of them are SBL quality, and I think they all know that, and they can happily make a spot for themselves if they're willing to put a team together and make it work logistically. I'm never quite sure how likely that is, and after the Valkyries disaster of Season 8, then, you know, you can't be that confident in it, but I really hope we see at least someone like Johnny or Deathwalker back in the league, because we saw over the amount of times that Mambo smacked down the Scarabs of those guys. They still got it. They're really, really good. And I think the league likes to see them. The watchers like to see them. I like to see them. Deathwalker gives me free content all the time. And this channel needs content, man. They can't be not letting Deathwalker in. How am I supposed to make videos now? One thing that I did see, which made me very sad, is the Vaporish Coast tweeted that he didn't make it into SBL this year, which I think is devastating, because I think he is a beast, and I think he's definitely SBL quality. The man's solo DR core. What more do you need to see? I really do think if any ADC starts lacking this year, starts slacking, the coast is going to sneak in there. And if I'm him, I'm not starting any long courses in the UK anytime soon, because I think after a couple of months' time, teams are going to, heads might be turning if these new teams that, come together without any real kind of cohesion or like future plan aren't performing, and they know they've got the Pentakid lurking on the sidelines. It would not surprise me to see him slot in. So yeah, taking it as a whole, it's just damn exciting, isn't it? The little bit of the old, a lot of the new, a lot of it all shaken up. I think we're going to see a really competitive first few weeks. I think the first few weeks are going to be wild. We're going to see teams beat one team and everyone's going to go, oh, they're really strong, and then lose to a team that everyone thought was really crap, and oh no, maybe they're really bad, maybe that team's really good. I think it's going to be a complete flux. You have to imagine that the Kings are going to be the dominant force from week one, just given that they're going to have no growing pains. As long as they can motivate themselves to actually turn up on time, they're still going to be really strong. I think the Leviathans may start a little slow, but will eventually work their way up to being one of the stronger teams. I cannot wait to see how the new Jade Dragons, formerly the Oni Warriors, are going to look. I mean, I really can't decide if they're going to be really slow or going to be hitting it out of the park from week one. I think the smart money says probably a slow start, but I've got faith they won't let me down again. They're going to be sick. I can feel it. I think the new Oni Warriors, the team with Pagon, Solo Troll, yada yada, are going to come out and hard stomp some games and absolutely shit it up in others. It's going to be interesting to see where their leadership comes from and how much of a role that plays moving forwards. The Titans, I just have no idea. I just have no idea. They could be top. They could be bottom. I think it's just down to how well the team actually gel this time. And then the Ravens, I think, are going to be a kind of the whipping boy for the first few weeks, sadly. But they've definitely got the potential to grow. So them's the teams. Who are you liking? Who are you disliking? What do you think? What horrendously obvious thing have I missed? I am quite hungover at the moment, and I've had to just bash this out in an afternoon. I've not really looked on the Reddit or on Twitter on what people are thinking of teams. I wanted to keep this as my views, just based on how the teams have looked previously. So yeah, what are you looking forward to? Which team are you particularly excited to see? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. Who are you going to be cheering for? Whose jersey are you buying? And how are you liking the new format changes as well? How do you think they're going to affect things? I'm really interested to hear your views, because you're all so cultured, handsome, smart, and powerful. So thank you very much for watching me ramble, and I'll see you in the next one.